Sup you beautiful people. Hope you've had a fantastic day. Welcome back to another new episode of What If Deku Was Trained by Saitama. Don't forget to shower some appreciation onto the incredible author responsible for this fanfiction. The link is conveniently waiting for you in the description box down below. If you guys enjoy this what if, comment down below and let me know. And go ahead and check out other what ifs in the channel after watching this video. Before we get into it though, don't forget to subscribe and leave a like, and also share this video with your friends. So let's start this video. It's my fault. It was an almost inaudible whisper. Though shaky, though soft, there was no shred of doubt in the girl's voice. Though the boy's cheeks were wet, his sadness had settled into a calm anger. He knows the intent behind those words. It was the little bandaged girl's way of saying, "Don't cry," but Kouda's tears had already stopped as he wipes away the residue on his face. Without much emotion, he states the obvious fact. It's not your fault. Children are not smart, but they aren't stupid either. Even though he can't see her face, it was clear to Kouda that the girl does not cry, and he can't help but feel at a loss. There might not have been any meaning for him to parrot her words. Boys don't cry, especially in front of a girl. It was common sense that young boys threw around. Such was the black and white lens children look through. If he continued crying, he felt like there was much more to lose. It was a funny thing really. He claimed to hate heroes. He had ranted about how he never wanted to have anything to do with quirks, and he had just shed tears after losing his, even if the effects were supposed to be temporary. His quirk was one of the last few ties remaining with his late heroic parents. His parents, his quirk and his everyday life were things he had taken for granted. When his parents died following their ideals, he blamed the society that did nothing but spout those same mass-produced ideals. A society shaped by quirks. Kouda was but a child and the only thing he could do was complain. "I'm pathetic." He stares at the lump under the blanket. The girl was only around his age and was probably stuck in their current situation for years, but did not shed one tear. He wonders if she's laughing at him under the blanket. Kouda grits his teeth and lets his insecurity flow out his mouth. "I'm not strong like you, okay?" Strong? Eri did not cry, but she did not laugh either. She lacked the ability to articulate how she felt. Despair, happiness, hope were all words she was never taught. She never went to school after all, nor had any knowledge such places existed. Their current situation to her was simply the natural state of things. Pain was something that was inevitable. That was why she couldn't understand the boy calling her strong. Being strong was a blessing, but she was not blessed. Without any doubt, she corrects him. "You're wrong. I'm cursed." She was a troublemaker that only caused trouble for others. She was someone who has never helped anyone else, yet harbored the desire to be helped by others. She hated her treatments and she had always wanted out, but one small misstep would always cause someone to break. Everything in this world was fragile, and she was someone who would inevitably break them, yet she still selfishly wishes to be outside. There was no forgiveness for someone like her. Curse is the word Kouda savors in his mouth. It was not apparent to her, but those were words Kouda frequently heard high school students say. High school students that didn't quite graduate from the 8th grade. Thanks to quirks, those same high school students don't ever truly grow up. He always tagged along with his aunt to summer camp, and would always overhear corny weirdos saying things like, "Blast reality, burst it to shreds, banishment this world. I am my own ghost. How can I die when I'm already dead?" The die is cast, and quite recently, what a mad banquet of darkness. Kouda may have reprimanded anyone else for saying such words, but the girl was different. She, a kid around his age, harbored guilt, even if it should have been the adults that should feel guilty. Kouda stares at his hand as he clenches his fist. All his life he had known people older than him who never harbored guilt. Doing whatever they please, believing themselves right. His parents, Shigaraki and that fake doctor. He turns his gaze to the one beside him, and acknowledges that he wasn't alone. All adults were like that. Mental patients that ran without stopping, without regard to responsibility while having powerless children carry the burden. This shall not stand. But the fake doctor may be insane, but he was seeking to cure insanity. The insanity brought upon by quirks. Quirks made each and everyone special, and under that delusion, they were able to pursue stupid dreams. Drunk on those dreams, kids would grow up to become corny heroes. The doctor sought to destroy those delusions. The doctor sought the cure. If Kouda was ignorant of how this cure was made, he would have wholeheartedly supported the quack, but Kouda knows the quack is a quack. He's sick too. Even a child could see that the fake doctor who wore that beak-like mask was drunk on his own delusions of destroying everyone else's delusions. The quack was a hypocrite that sought to destroy quirks with quirks. Despite that, there is something Kauta has to admit. Even if it's wrong, he has an answer. That was in contrast to the boy who had no idea where to start and did nothing but complain. He was a hypocrite too. Strength is worthless without a goal, which was why those without knowledge are powerless. So the boy sits down and ponders. He has his entire life to plot his answer, but right now he needed the first step. Reviewing some medical files along the way, the doctor enters the room of a certain patient. He stares at the young bandaged boy with casts all over his body, and with a heavy heart, he breaks the news. "I'm sorry, but maybe you should give up on being a hero." Those were the words of some old-looking doctor to the young Bakugo who was sprawled over a hospital bed covered in various casts. From the x-rays of his broken leg, not to mention other various bone fractures throughout the rest of his body, it would be a miracle if Bakugo could stand again. "Do you know who I am?" The winner of the recent sports festival wasn't exactly unknown. "I have your name right. The #1 hero in the making." The doctor sometimes regrets his choice of career. If only he listened to his parents. "I'm sorry, but with the condition of your leg then. Cut it off." "Excuse. Give me a cybernetic one like Stilt Legs." Even the teachers at UA weren't immune to the nicknames. "But your leg doesn't need to be amputated." Bakugo tries to reach for the phone on the counter at his bedside, but he cannot. His arm can move, but the rest of his body cannot. "You don't tell me what surgery I want, I tell you." "Doctor, cut my leg off. I want a robot leg. Tungsten." That villain he fought that gave him his injuries was supped up with all sorts of cybernetics. If they can give some low-life trash an artificial eye, they can give him his sweet robot leg, can't they? It's not like cybernetics are in their infancy, they have been around for centuries. When looking up info on that baldy, that cyborg beside him was hard to miss. There must be a medical conspiracy just like with health insurance. Even with cybernetics. You already gave me the facts, but I don't need opinions. Get me my phone and I'll call the support department. I'll order up a tungsten leg with rockets. Those nerds don't tell me what to invent, I tell them. How do you think I got these? The injured boy puts emphasis on his wrists, completely forgetting that he isn't wearing his grenade-shaped gauntlets. "I don't care if I have to amputate both legs, just do it." Rocket legs. As a practiced medical practitioner, that is just more lawsuits too. "Cut the legs and let me soar. Let's hit it. Let's roll. All you need to do is cut off my legs." If you're not on board, no, even if you are on board, screw you and your father. Hey, I'm the one taking all the risks. I won't hog all the glory when cybernetics become the de facto standard for heroes. Hey world, this is how crime is fought now. The doctor tries to contemplate what was happening before him, and he arrives at the most logical conclusion, and quickly scribbles it in a notebook he produces from his pocket. "Are you high on the painkillers? You must be high on the painkillers. Note to self. Subscribe less milligrams of." Katsuki was getting more and more annoyed as the conversation went on. "You're just a doctor, let the engineers handle this." In that moment, the door of the room is blown wide open. "Katsuki, you don't speak to the doctor like that." Entering the room was the woman Bakugo inherited his tongue from. A woman with gorgeous skin so smooth, you wouldn't think she would be old enough to be the mother of a teenage boy already. "This isn't about you, old hag." His mother crosses her arms. It was a good thing her quirk kept her skin in good condition, because any other woman would have had premature wrinkles if she scowled as much as her. 15 years and you're still as irritating as the day I birthed you." Katsuki was still reaching for his phone. Inching his fingers, but it was pointless. "How motherly for you to bring that up. Phone now." Mitsuki knew her son was simply a big fish in a small pond. She believed that going to UA, which was teeming with big fish, she believed her son would finally realize how small he actually was. Maybe naming him Katsuki was a mistake. She had hoped things would change once her son entered high school. "Going to UA, did it not knock you down a few pegs?" The doctor tries his best to defuse the situation. "Well, Ingenium also had some career-ending injuries, but you know with quirks anything goes, so I'll phone him up and see if I can connect you with the person who..." Just because Katsuki was usually a ball of rage did not mean his mind was cloudy. He could already guess what was behind Ingenium's miraculous recovery. He wasn't going to play into their hands. There was no hesitation whatsoever. Rejected. Birthdays come and go. In ancient times when child mortality was high, a birthday was a celebration of survival. In those days before sanitation, plumbing and when bad harvests guaranteed famine, death was a common companion. Like all the other animals on Earth, couples would have as many kids as they could, because it was a fact that only a fraction of them would survive into adulthood. It was a forgotten sentiment in certain eras of prosperity, and death was on the minds of only the few. This was certainly true in the Age of All Might, but times were quickly becoming turbulent. Protesters were congregating next to the bridge to Tartarus. On that isolated island, it was Greek mythology made real, a dungeon where the worst of sinners would spend eternity or at least the rest of their lives. Row by row, trucks filled with the true people of the earth, waiting to enter the underworld. Like a skull of fish getting caught in the flow. Gunhead and the Sand Hero Snatch were overseeing the protesters with a group of police officers, ensuring nothing happened to the convoys. A nice summer day, a great day for a barbecue, Snatch muses. Everywhere, the heroes were stretched thin. The public wasn't pleased with the fact that a group of people had been secluded underground for centuries. Not because these people were terrorists, no, but because someone posted a conspiracy theory on the internet that gained traction. Dispersing the protesters would only fuel that sentiment, so the heroes were only watching. Watching the convoys and hoping that the protesters stayed peaceful. Desro's mission is still left incomplete. An HNA reporter steadies her microphone, trying to catch every word of the one on the podium. The man wore a top hat and seemed accustomed to talking in front of a large audience, possibly even performing. Flocking towards the ideals of someone else. The true people of the earth were so numerous that they could not all be loaded up onto armored caravans. It was only natural that some escaped, and of those few that escaped, some of them were able to find shelter. Of those few, a certain injured one was picked off the ground as one might pick up a marble. Fish speaking to fish. Fish in a barrel. Seiko, known as Mr. Compress when Mast had tried reading Shigaraki's intentions of being caught intentionally, and such was the conclusion he came up with. The League of Villains had various members, but only the ones who were rounded by the police were known to overhaul. The others had free rein to operate however they pleased, so the man who loved masks was putting his own little plan into action. The kindling had already been set with all the recent incidents, so all that was needed was a significant little spark. Without further ado, my friend has something to say. He was a showman and was a little distraught for not being the center of attention as he exits the stage. That attention was grabbed by the one-armed mole man who was sobbing. On the podium, one of the true people of the earth describes his story. The citizens could see the various wounds, the missing arm and disfigured face. Offerings burned on an altar to create the modern era. That was what the true people of the earth were. I never thought I would be able to speak. I lived my whole life underground with my head down, but today is different. The mole man was just a nameless subterranean of no importance, but precisely because of that, he was chosen. Words were awkward at first, but the flames of his resolve propel his voice. I have no choice but to speak. Fellow earthlings, all people of the earth, we have been divided and conquered. Regardless of how we live, we are all cattle. Those elites who stand on the top have abandoned us, branding us as monsters, but I ask of you, what have we done? We the people of the earth simply lived underground, wishing for the surface, but it was denied to us because it was convenient for those elites. We always lived in fear that the earth would consume us. In this land of earthquakes, we have endured, but that did not mean we did not desire more. We were jealous. That jealousy was simply a tool to divide us. We grew angry, while you grew complacent with your lot in life. Our great leader, the one I had called king, was sacrificed. He only wanted us to experience the surface that you lot enjoy, but he is no longer with us. His life taken by what this society calls a hero in training. Seriously? Was what some in the crowd would mutter. Called it. Another would yell. Why? We wanted to live on the surface as you do, but there is not enough land to go around, the elites would say. Packed in things you call skyscrapers and apartments within them. Land is a limited commodity. There simply isn't enough living space. That was why we were forced underground. That is why many of you live in such cramped concrete squalor just as we did. Just as we feared those tremors underground, you fear them too as you are trapped in the sky. Yet, is there a shortage of surface land? These outrageous prices, who can afford them? The elites. The elites. The elites. The elites. The crowd would chant. The prices are high, because there is a shortage of land, yet when it comes to those private soldiers called heroes, there are plenty wide open spaces for training. Many believe that the fight for equality is over. That the man you call Destro ultimately succeeded in his goals, and the elites had listed, but that is not true. That is nothing more than a convenient lie that those elites have fabricated. By growing complacent and putting faith in the guardians of those government elites, you are playing into their trap. If one day you must be sacrificed for their convenience, will you do it willingly? Hell no. The war is not over. Never forget that they have trampled us and will trample all of you in time. Many of my Noah brothers have perished in the face of our enemy. The fakes. What of Stain who tried to fight against that flow? They caged him. What of the league of villains that tried putting our situation into light? They silenced them. Compared to the enemy, we are weak and they are strong. Our resources, our training and our everything cannot be compared to theirs, yet how have we persisted? Every time we are buried, we monsters always find a way to rise up week after week. It's because we the weak are the ones truly just. They may win the day, but we will rise every week. Monsters they call us. The status quo cannot stand. Victory is the greatest tribute we can pay for those. A shot is heard. The speaker falls dead on the podium. The cause was a single slug to the cranium. They are shooting at us. The protesters turn their gaze on the police and the heroes who were watching the protest. Wait, this is what Gunhead tries to say before the crowd charges. Minus ultra plus chaos. Is what Mr. Compress yells into the crowd as he makes his getaway. Minus ultra plus chaos. Is what the protesters repeat as they charge against the police. Minus ultra plus chaos. Is what protesters continue to repeat as some of them try to flee the scene with a certain unmasked man fleeing with them. Minus ultra plus chaos. Were the words recorded on someone's smartphone, uploaded onto the internet. In fact, the whole speech was sparking more internet discussions on various forums. The fired shot. Is what the police chief yells in his radio. The barricade was overrun in minutes. Police cruisers were smashed by giant feet. Tear gas was thrown into the crowd, yet a heavy gale blew the gas away. Punches are thrown. Shots of keratin pepper the crowd. The crowd responds with jets of water to oppose the water hoses. Flyers rise from the crowd, and rocks are thrown downward onto the armored cars. A cascade of stone befalls the police officers. The police officers return fire with rubber bullets. A charging group of beastkin make the charge past the bullets that bounce harmlessly off them. The ground beneath them changes with the movement of sand. The land is changed around them, and the noise they made could be heard miles away. There were no altar to this dispute, only chaos remained. Hidden in a tree, Mustard's fingers tremble as the exotic gun in his hand shakes after firing that one shot. The one shot that would make all the difference. A smile blooms on his face as he admires his own handiwork. Minute work. For his outstanding performance at the Forest Lodge, Mustard was given a reward by the one their leader called Sensei. The very quirk of the hero he had captured was now his. Unlike those fakes attending UA, Mustard was different, and his efforts were finally acknowledged. The quirk known as homing, that allowed one to control the trajectory of one's shots. Ha 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 ha. A shadowy figure stands on the branch opposite to him. Gloating just because you received a gift from Master. What gift did he give you, you overglorified chauffeur? Kurgiri was not amused at the upstart's remark. We're leaving. The police were outnumbered and cars were being tossed about. Even if a hero is trained against an army of quirk users, few could come up on top. It was then he appeared, a white cape and a bald head, the Cape Baldy. Out of the blue he stands on the podium, yet everyone ignores him. He jumps down from the podium and grabs the nearest protester, a rhino man by the horn with his left. Tossing him to the ground he delivers a punch with his right. The earth shakes and the bridge buckles. Everyone's sight is drawn onto the man and the crater he created. They saw the unmoving body of a rhinoman in that crater. It was a sight of downed prey. The atmosphere became suffocating for everyone in the vicinity knew their place as prey. For those who held doubt in their actions, the place was unbearable. Human supremacist were the words of an old penguin in the crowd. To many with mutation quirks, the Cape Baldy was a creature mothers tell to their kids at bedtime. Garbed in yellow, a white cape and a bald head, the human-looking inhuman spells certain doom. Before throwing a punch, that creature will snuff out your existence as a matter of fact. It's a summer blowout at the farmer's market, you know. And what do I run across on my way there? The words are nonsensical, but the tone is unmistakable. The man before them was angry, and it was clear that he could end them in an instant. Thus, everyone was still, but not everyone. They're those that get a little jumpy when faced with apex predators. Fake. A boy with a mask draped over his face with a wooden sword in hand charges at the man, but that wooden sword is broken by some unseen force. The crowd is drawn onto the scene. The old man delivers the following words without yelling, yet with the air so still around them, it was something even the hearing impaired could hear. Go home. The words held no patience. The words held no mercy. To disobey was not an option. Got it, is what the masked boy mumbles to himself, yet with his shaking legs, he could not flee. You need help. The force of nature extends his gloved hand, but the child's fear of the one before him overcomes the fear of death, and with strength in his legs he runs away without thinking about the future. The other rioters follow suit, with speed unknown to them. Wah! The crowd is dispersed with the stiff tension along with it. The buckling bridge could not handle the stress, and it is split in two. The police sirens go off and Saitama is taken in for questioning. Of course, is what Saitama says with a heavy sigh. Did you just kill him? Is what a stuttering gunhead says to the stranger looking at the rhino man in the crater. No, I just made it look like I punched him to scare the crowd, he says with a flustered face. Once again, a misunderstanding occurs. The daily life of the Cape Baldy, the hero everyone needs, but might not deserve. Netsu along with Aizawa takes a seat across the Midoriya's coffee table. The mother and son are fidgeting, only thinking about the worst possible reasoning for the sudden visit. Expulsion. I know that Izuku still holds regret for the things he had done. For the lives he could not save and the lives he had ignored. It wouldn't be unthinkable for him to be judged unfit to become a hero after what he had done on an emotional high. Explosion. Inko proceeds to think of the unsavory things her son has been hiding from her. Ever since he became strong, he had become a little rebellious. That's not it, Aizawa clarifies. Netsu proceeds to break into a smile to defuse the situation. With a heavy heart, I would like to make an apology. Izuku could barely fathom the words that said, but he quickly catches on to the last part. I'm sorry. Apology. Netsu looks over the boy's reaction, and confirms that he had made a wrong initial assessment. The boy held a logical strength and with an origin that in no way explained that strength. Diagnosed as quirkless, despite coming from a family that had 4 generations worth of quirks, the boy was a statistical anomaly, but Netsu had to admit that he himself was an anomaly. Animals with quirks were rare, and if the classified files kept by the government are to be believed, the source of various internet rumors, the reason they were rare was because of the Cape Baldy. The White Cape Man was the natural predator for life forms that deviated from the human standard. That was why he could never fathom why Gran Torino's old friend had sported one herself. Netsu tried to think logically back then, but the scar across one of his eyes made him remember. He had remembered what humankind was capable of. Humans can have great compassion for their own kind, but to those different from themselves, they could be cruel. Regardless of what he has seen, Netsu cannot forget those urban legends that always held a hint of truth. Netsu could not trust the old bald man in the white cape, but seeing that man around the students, he knew for a fact that his distrust was misplaced. Saitama was strong. None were stronger than him. Saitama was the absolute strongest, but despite that, he was ordinary. Seeing that man collect coupons during breaks and invite other teachers for grocery shopping, so he could snag some extra items that were limited one per family, was a sobering experience. Despite the rumors of his absolute power being absolutely true, Saitama was ordinary. He was the farthest thing away from being a monster. In those dark times, the ones who were persecuted were the ones who looked different, the ones with inhuman mutation quirks who couldn't pass as quirkless, like the many hidden emission-type quirk users that must have existed back then. The ones who were undoubtedly different were undoubtedly persecuted, thus were always the first ones to lash out violently, and meeting their demise violently at the hands of early heroes. Heroes like Saitama. It was clear that the old man had no ill will against those that looked different. From his position up high as the absolute strongest, everyone must have looked the same to him down below. No matter the size, color or appearance, to the man who stood at the highest point, what was the difference? Everyone down below was the same, yet even as non-existent dots, the man held those invisible dots in high regard. Saitama wasn't really famous, only liked by a select few. Many people scoff at his accomplishments, thinking of them as rumors blown out of proportion. For many others, the bald hat and white cape became a symbol of genocide used by bigots. It was only natural that such bigots be harassed on the streets. From his deductive reasoning skills, that must have been the reason why Saitama had met the young Midoriya in the first place. Yes, I misjudged you. No, I misjudged everything. Netsu was always good at logic, but human emotions were things he had difficulty understanding, including the ones he harbored himself. Logically speaking, the League of Villains was an insignificant enemy. Shigaraki, the man-child, would throw away perfectly good resources at the problem for no return. That was what happened at USJ. That was how the Naomu was caught. Then again, villains were always experts at manipulating perceptions. It was something the Age of All Might dulled his senses to. Under All Might, all the smartest villains were forced into hiding. Only fools would prance about in the open, and their crimes were always petty like purse snatching. Regardless of what bad impressions one might have about Shigaraki, it was obvious that someone was backing him, and that someone was also teaching him. Someone that was a master of manipulation, and in this world of quirks, logic can be easily overturned. In a world where quirks exist, anything is possible, and traditional technologies like DNA testing are not 100% reliable. Quirks broke the laws of physics such as the conservation of mass and energy, instead obeying their own little rules. Anything can be faked and anyone can be made to look suspicious. Beyond the board, there existed unaccounted variables that weren't represented by pieces. I was arrogant, thinking I had all the facts, putting my faith in facts over people, and I have underestimated our enemy. There were enemies that could not be beaten through force alone, if the history of warfare is something to learn from. War was nothing more than a tool of negotiation between two sides. Even in the absence of hatred, wars will break out simply because there is something someone wants. Territory, resources or pushing ideologies are always the endgame objectives for any conflict. Either the objective is met, or the cost becomes too great to justify. You can have all the advantages and you can win every battle, but still lose the war against an enemy that continues to persist. The underdog enemies that harbor a different set of logic than you and are willing to foot the bill in human lives you didn't think fathomable. Those were the lessons learned in the 20th to 21st century. That was how a backwaters country with huts could force the one with helicopters to leave. So don't think of this as a late birthday present, but happy birthday nonetheless. Netsu from a bejeweled case reveals a card, and with both hands, gives it to the young Midoriya. Izuku stares in his hand and realizes what it is. Provisional Hero License. It was only July, and the licensing exam was supposed to be held in August. I'm making an exception. It would be negligent of me not to put one of our strongest assets to use. Izuku wasn't sure what to say. I can't pose, yet Izuku stops himself mid-sentence. It was unfair for his classmates, but it would be rude to refuse it. It was incredibly rare for someone to put their faith in him. Until meeting Saitama, no one put faith in him in fact. Remember, it's not a present. Aizawa interjects. In fact, you'll be helping out another birthday boy figuring out his present, is what Netsu admits with a sly smile. Another birthday boy. Netsu takes note of the boy's face. There was no secret conspiracy despite the evidence. His gut feeling was that the evidence was fabricated. The aspiring hero trainee's sincerity and altruism was genuine. For the few times in his life, Netsu would follow his feelings and not facts. This is a heavy burden. Izuku does not hesitate. Izuku accepts his duty. You can count on me. Inko isn't sure what to think with the current events happening. The quirkless son she had was someone who held whoever was in his sight, because he could not stand the sight of people suffering. Having his dreams crushed at an early age, he knew agony. He could not tolerate others in agony, so he would always come to reassure the people he could see, but ever since he gained that power, he was compelled to actively seek trouble. To help the people he could not see. That was the responsibility that came with being strong. In that way, her son was changing and becoming distant. He would smile less and less. She could see the miserable face he would make when he gets home after some unofficial patrol. She regrets never putting faith in her son's dream, so it was arrogant to ask for more, but as a mother she asks anyways. Can you promise me one thing? His mother's question comes out of the blue. He answers her gaze with his own. What is it? She takes her 2 index fingers and presses them against his cheeks. Don't forget to smile, or your mother's spirit can't take it. The words were nostalgic. Netsu recalls All Might saying something like that. It was something All Might's rumored master must have said to him. When you have to save someone, they're usually in a scary situation. A true hero saves not only their lives, but also their spirits. So show them a smile that befits your strength because you are strong. Can you do that? Izuku slowly turns his head, and a wide smile blooms as he accepts his responsibility. For that responsibility was something he wished for ever since he was small. On the card he was handed was the hero named Deku, and from now on, he'll carry that name with pride. I can do it. Shoto had always hated his father, but of late, that hate was dissipating, and it was all thanks to a certain individual. He no longer hated his father, because he had no more hatred left to spare. You've killed me 2 times so far, some hero you are. Sometimes he would hear these words in his sleep. He knows for certain that 3, 4, 5, 6, or any number of times would not satisfy him. In this entire world, there was no one he hated more. Yano like Ezith. She would have gotten along with your father just fine. He didn't understand what those words meant, and he wishes he never looked it up. Despite his father's shortcomings, behind his cruelty was a goal anyone could understand. He hated his father who refused to own up to the damage he was inflicting on his own family, yet that family irreparably destroyed by some outsider who thought of life as a badly written comic book, making it sound like you were doing us a favor. He was raised in a world where heroes and villains run about as an entirely ordinary thing, but even so, villains were far removed from his daily life despite having a hero as a father. In those days, the only evil he had known firsthand was in the form of his father. His father ran towards his goal, ignoring everything else, and was completely callous to the people he ran over to get there. His father did not think at all of the feelings of others, only obsessed with his own. Yet, now Shoto knew firsthand that there were indeed people that simply ran over others for even less. Ordinary people just living their lives could be destroyed for something that could not even be called a reason. People could throw each other away without a thought, and Shoto realized that he harbored the same sin. "Don't worry, we're all in this together," were words directed to Monoma that day, the day before he disappeared. Monoma was gone. Maybe Shoto could have done something, yet he had done nothing that day. On that day, he ran towards his goal, ignoring everything else, and someone paid the price. In his dreams he could hear the laughter. They had accused him of being a hypocrite, and yet, thinking back on that day and had proven them right. "The angrier I get, the happier they became." Those were the words that rushed to the surface of his lips as he wakes. He checks the time and the date on his phone. It was the day of the provisional license exam. To become a hero, he had to cast away such feelings. That was the reason why he had held his ground at summer camp against those monsters, instead of seeking out the perpetrators. He could not plunge others into misery just to satiate his own anger. "I need to prove why I'm better." Ha! What's this? What's this? Where's the number 1 and 2? That was the question posed to the class of 1A of UA as they entered the examination grounds. Aizawa watches the exam go on by the bleachers, and only had a single thought on his mind. It's a good thing he isn't here. Every member of the UA staff remembers the entrance exam involving a certain green-haired kid, especially the one responsible for accounting. Due to the sheer number of training robots destroyed by a single individual, they had to hold another exam just to properly judge the other students. The bureaucrats from the government, which held a tight leash on school budgets, wasn't too happy about that particular incident, despite the kid's promise. UA, touted to have an unlimited budget, was taught the true meaning of unlimited by that boy's fist. That was the main reasoning behind Midoriya's newly granted provisional hero license. He would be the only one to pass. Well, it seems I'm not the only one who wants to sit through this twice. Mayor of the Hero Public Safety Commission was barely conscious after being overworked, and anyone could tell that he would have rather been anywhere else at this moment. Aizawa wonders if the man had pulled any strings. It was only the first stage of the exam, and the UA students are already surrounded by the others, singled out for elimination in a modern game of dodgeball. 3 tags adorn the costumes of each student in various places. In every hand is a small ball, and every student has their eye on the tags of their enemy. Nostalgic, isn't it? Say, they don't seem surprised. You didn't tell them anything, did you? Wait, isn't that? Miss Joke tells Dad it is as she hands Aizawa a drink. She eyes the robotic limb and was about to say something before being interrupted. Unnecessary. Of course, is what escapes from Todoroki's lips. Feels like some bad horror movie, Denki says with a grin. If something will go wrong, it will go wrong, Jiro adds with a look of annoyance. Brace yourselves, Momo says with her arm outstretched. Things were serious, because not even Mineta quipped about some exposed armpit. An all-out assault by a numerically superior enemy, but it was a laughable thing compared to what had happened on that day at summer camp. That day when their lives were on the line and had to ignore their rumbling bellies. Compared to that day, they were prepared. As the balls sail through the air to meet their mark, a barricade of ice erupts from the ground and intercepts them. What? We all had breakfast, Uraraka says with zeal as she places her hands on the barricade of ice. The barrier of ice, only strong enough to withstand baseballs, was the only thing separating the students of UA from their prey. As the cage of ice is liberated from gravity, the predators were liberated from their captivity. Before anyone could blink, Iida quickly slides under it, leaving scorch marks in his wake as he races up the perch in which their enemy occupied. Cry havoc, and let slip the dogs of war. All eyes were focused on him at this one moment. Stealing their resolve, the enemy holds their ground. Focus fire. Despite the coordination of the enemy, they were no match for UA. Iida was not alone as chunks of ice were thrown to intercept enemy shots. Some propelled with whip-like motions with tape, others were just thrown by a boy on a sugar high. Shoot. A realization dawns on the enemy. They were momentarily too focused on the speedster, and didn't notice that the rest of the UA students had mobilized in the span of a few seconds. Shindo did not stray his eyes from the cluster of UA students, and he tries to split them up by splitting the earth, but his vibrations were negated by vibrations of the same frequency. The homeroom teachers were watching the entire fraction of a second exchange. Your batch this year is quite something, aren't they? You're not showing concern for your own, are you? Aizawa looks onto Jiro as she retracts her axe from the ground as she sighs in relief. After experiencing summer camp, she knew the terror of being alone. Well, they all did, especially Kirishima. For that reason, everyone was making a mental note of the location of everyone else. Nothing is scarier than the unknown. In the hands of a certain squad was a contraption whipped up quickly by Momo. The assault force loads up the hopper with the exam-designated projectiles, and with the pull of a trigger, the opposition is doused. This isn't very manly, but Kirishima had held off well when he was held captive beneath the earth. Even so, he endured that experience. It wasn't something he wanted to endure again. For all his want of being a proper man among men, it did not change the fact he felt fear. When Mina was in trouble on that day when they were simply middle schoolers, he looked the other way. He wanted to change things once he had entered UA. He had dyed his hair and adopted a more outgoing personality, but part of it was nothing more than a lie. As his thoughts drift to the two students that weren't here, he understands that he isn't alone in that. Even those who occupy the top ranks feel it, and it simply fuels their drive. Feelings of inferiority, imposter syndrome are simply part of the human condition. For better or worse, it is for that reason that heroes covet the title of number one. Something that can serve as undisputable evidence of one's worth. Regrettably, Kursahima wasn't as ambitious, but he knew he had to move forward with whatever he had. His hard-hitting quirk wasn't very useful in a game of dodgeball. A ball simply had to hit him at the right spot. His durability did not matter, which was why Momo had given him a weapon. He hoses down the opposition. Though all the other schools had designated UA as prey, they were nothing more than a loose mob. It wasn't the first time that an enemy of overwhelming numbers sought out to eradicate them. For those UA students who had survived against the true people of the earth who were out for their blood, the will of their new enemy was lacking. What's wrong with these people? As they turn their heads, they see the speedster with a piece of tape strapped onto his back. Sero was grinning. The cavalry is here. Trailing behind Iida was Sero riding on Mina's shoulders, with the slippery acidic substance she produced from her feet being used as makeshift skis. Sero jumps off and plants his feet firmly into the ground, giving Iida the signal to circle around. Like a drafting compass, a circle is drawn into the dirt, and anyone caught up in that circle fell victim to the tape. The victims are gathered up, and Mineta comes forward breaking into a smile with Sato trailing closely behind. Instead of tagging the contestants out, UA crafts the fallen into a huge adhesive ball of bodies. Wait, isn't this? Have you no common sense? Uraka touches the ball with one hand and gives Iida a thumbs up, and Iida takes this as the signal to run wild. King of all cosmos. The clump rolls about as Iida pulls it along, getting bigger and bigger with each victim it touches, building momentum, just before the tape is cut. Once that line is cut, Shoto quickly hops onto the clump and makes a temporary spot, and becomes a temporary jet engine with the use of his flames. He steers the ball around guided by Koda's pigeons. He could not see in front of him, but he could still momentarily glimpse the sky. The victims of the clump are many. A flaming sticky ball of bodies covered in steam that keeps on getting faster and faster. Even though the clump started out small, it grew larger with every new addition, while gaining momentum. What is this? Was all the victims of the ever-expanding clump of bodies could say. Their allies were running away from the pigeons that directed the instrument of failure. Individually, Class 1 was still lacking, but unlike many others their age, they had acknowledged their own weakness. Growing up, each of them was exceptional, but at UA, being exceptional was the norm. At UA, they had met a boy who was simply a statistical anomaly. Midoriya was the absolute strongest. It was a fact that could not be refuted. Midoriya's very existence had shaken their perceptions to the core, but even so, Bakugo challenged that being that defied common sense. The rest of Class 1 was left in the dust behind those two, but it was for that reason, they had to keep running. Midoriya had already gotten his license before them. Running without stopping, that was the body's natural inclination. Even if the mind has accepted defeat, the body continues to move on its own. Iida had always been a stickler for the rules built on common sense, but if he had learned anything from his time at UA was simply this. Common sense. True heroes don't have such a thing. Common sense was something the ordinary possessed, but heroes are heroes because they refuse to be ordinary. The blow was struck without any semblance of finesse, yet it was a blow heavier than he had ever felt before. His body was out of phase as that fist passed harmlessly through his chest. His resolve. The fake buildings behind him were blown away. Mirio sizes up the first year in front of him garbed in green. There were many wasted movements in his opponent's attacks. Clearly a junior, but despite Deku's amateurish movements, he did not lack strength or foresight. Mirio prepares a counterattack, but his opponent was prepared, slamming his foot into the ground, creating a dust storm, and obscuring his vision. I see. While phased out, light could not reach his eyes, and air could not pass into his lungs. It was the fundamental weakness of permeation. By targeting the chest, the green boy had forced him to ditch the air in his lungs. Follow that up with a dust storm, and it would certainly make it hard for him to breathe. The most logical option for the third year was to retreat into the ground and gain some breathing room. Into the ground, then. Deku wasn't sure what to think when Netsu mentioned another birthday boy. Right now, he was sparring with one of the big three, the one touted to being the closest to being the next number one. The senior's punches were heavy, but they weren't his quirk, considering how he keeps disappearing and reappearing from the ground and from the walls. For that reason, Deku kept launching attacks at the third year, with the true intent of demolishing all the surrounding buildings, to limit the surfaces in which he could interact with. Unknowingly, Deku had sealed away Mirio's signature move, Phantom Menace, with that decision. Now that only the ground was left, Deku simply had to stomp it when the older boy disappears from his view. The once even ground is fractured in all sorts of weird jagged shapes from the tremors. For every force is an equal and opposite reaction, which is why he can build momentum with his quirk by taking advantage of Van der Waals' forces. If I make the ground uneven then. Mirio ejects from the ground and soars into the air uncontrollably. To use his permeation quirk for effective movement, knowledge of the terrain is a must. Due to the nature of permeation, there was always a gap of information he could take in, as his quirk effectively cuts off his senses from the outside world while in use. On flat ground, the quick calculations he needed to perform in his head were quite simple, but he couldn't expect that his opponent could so quickly change the flat ground so easily. He could not rely on memorization, and the randomness of the terrain made things harder to predict. I should use that. He readies his fingers behind him, and uses the air blasts generated with 100% of All Might's quirk to steer himself back on course. I have more experience, but he's purposely fighting in a way to seal that advantage off. Heh. Ever since interning with Night Eye, there were very few who could keep up with him. Now that he had been recently gifted One for All, the gap was even wider. A small part of him misses the feeling he felt just a few years ago. Those years ago, when doing the simplest of things was a challenge. When every small victory felt hard-earned. People in his childhood were right to scoff at his dream and dismiss him as clumsy. In these last few years, his efforts bore fruit, and he was able to overturn what was factually right. In those early years, triumph meant something, but in his final year at UA, triumph became routine. It became expected. Right now, Mirio was smiling in the face of uncertainty. I forgot what it felt like. What it means to live. What it means to fight. What it means to struggle. In this one spar, he remembered it all. Soaring above the dust and debris, the third year prepares his fist. New Hampshire smash. The sky shakes, and the third year comes crashing down like a rod from God, with his foot forming an intimidating spear point, but the boy down below prepares his fist. His right arm cocks back like the hammer of a gun. Texas smash, serious series. The boy's fist cuts through space, creating cavitations bubbles in the air. The implosions for but a moment reach temperatures hotter than the sun. The momentary flash of light blinds even the spectators. The shockwave generated cuts through the sky. As Mirio meets the shockwave, he quickly phases out to avoid being blown away into space, only to phase back in, just as his foot meets Deku's face, or what was supposed to be his face. In place of a face was a hand. Foot shake is what escapes Deku's lips. He had caught the attack with his left hand. His glove was burned through, but his skin was unscathed. He didn't know if he could catch such an attack, but he did so anyway. His body had moved on its own. Was all the third year could respond with, before breaking into a smile. You were holding back. The spar had to be called off. To repair the damage done in this one spar would take Cementus the rest of summer. If it was any other time in the year, such a thing would be unacceptable. The students would complain about the lack of training facilities. The principal planned this, didn't he? Masters sometimes are not the most effective at teaching. A large gap in power and experience makes it harder for useful knowledge to be passed down. Many teachers forget what it's like to be a student. It is for that reason people say how C students make better teachers than A students. It is for that reason why people like All-Mighter Saitama may not make the best of teachers. For those who stand at the very top have little idea how to teach those on the bottom. It is for that reason that having more than one student is ideal, because they could learn from each other if they fail to learn anything from their assigned teacher. How? That was the reasoning Netsu had given Sir Night-Eye about letting a recent first-year spar with Mirio, who had trouble figuring out one for all, but something about the first year unnerved him. He didn't know what it was until that final clash happened. He tried to read the future, in a vain attempt to steer it with the seconds he had left as he ran towards Tatsu. I can't read his future. Sir Night-Eye had always believed that the foresight his court granted to him was absolute. The concept of uncertainty was something that was supposed to be alien to him, yet that boy had made him face it. He didn't want to believe. He didn't want to believe such people could exist, but the truth was undeniable. New Hampshire smash. Texas smash, serious series. The sky shook unnaturally. Common sense says that someone should have died in such a clash. In that span of time, Sir Night-Eye's suit had become unkempt as he held his breath at the outcome. Please. When the dust cleared, everything was alright. The boy simply caught the attack. The outcome clearly surprised the boy, yet at the same time, he acted like it was expected, laughing at the whole nerve-wracking ordeal off. When Sir Night-Eye first met the boy, he didn't think much of him. A skittish-looking fellow with no sense of humor, whose only saving grace was his taste in heroes. Despite a weak first impression, that unnerving feeling that took him out of his comfort zone, Sir Night-Eye was reminded of what he saw in All Might. A madman? No. A hero. A hero was someone that ignores their limits, who push themselves to greater heights, who leave common sense behind and forge their own fate. It was an unnerving madness Sir Night-Eye had always both feared and admired, but could never bring himself to emulate. As he feels for his face, to reassure him that what he just witnessed was actually reality. His glasses had become crooked, and he slowly readjusts them as he finds himself smiling. So much for foresight. It would appear that I'm the one that must change. Shoto takes the surroundings in, the crumbled buildings, the injured and the villains all into his sight. No longer would be blinded by a single thing. To overcome his personal problems, he had to ignore them. To become the person he sought to be, he had to take it all in, and that was exactly what the examiners were looking for. Ice clears the rubble away, and fire melts the excess, providing the victims a passage of escape. Just follow the tunnel and everything will be fine. On the streets, Todoroki had felt it. The stares from strangers, judging and gauging him, wondering if he would crack like his mother. Like his father. His mother was locked away, asleep in some undisclosed hospital. His father was still going through court hearings. The sight of that man in a wheelchair, propelling himself without a care to the judging gazes. Outside factors don't matter. He had wished as a child for someone to save his family from his father, but no one did. That was why he brought it on himself to become such a hero, yet by focusing on his own personal matters, he ignored everyone else. He knew what it was like to feel such despair, yet it was undeniable that many had it worse. He couldn't see his father as a good man, but at the very least, his father was a man and not a monster. Out there exist true monsters and people in need of saving, with no one to save them. It seems I forgot. That's the person I wanted to be. The mind clears. He's completely focused on the task at hand. In front of him was a girl with a sprain, and he gently creates a cast with ice. Is that better? His mind is like a block of ice, but even ice can have impurities. The girl gives no reply, except for a smile with a mischievous tint. That mom is boy. He's changed, somewhat. That was the conclusion Toga arrived at while posing as a member of Huck, Help Us Company. She had avoided other rescuers by hiding her presence. In the midst of chaos, it was easy for their senses to turn away from her presence. Clearing her mind, holding her breath, she could disappear by becoming nothing. It was a skill Toga picked up when indulging in her hobby. As long as one wasn't wearing anything too out of place, one would be indistinguishable from the background. Yet the scarred pretty boy was unusually attentive, but Toga paid no mind to that. No sign of Deku anywhere. Anywhere. No Deku in sight. Or is he hiding? Hiding, waiting. Toga was waiting for Deku, but Deku wasn't here. Instead, she was found by a familiar scarred face, but that face was calmer. The mama's boy had learned to be attentive, but not quite attentive enough. Minus points. Even if Endeavor's masterpiece managed to take his eyes off his hated father, he was still not familiar with taking everything into his eyes. Despite moving forward, an amateur is an amateur. Meets shield. In the distance watching was the unsuspecting student Shigaraki had used for cover during summer camp. The boy's name was Inasa, but Toga didn't care to remember it. The boy quickly turns away and seeks out others to be rescued. There were many things as of late, much more important than his petty dislike of Endeavor and his son. Inasa had always liked passionate heroes, and it was a revelation for him that the one who burned the brightest wasn't passionate at all. Cold eyes that refused to look at him as a child who simply sought an autograph, yet when Inasa had visited that man in the hospital, there was only a pitiful figure. In that incident at Wookiees with that man's wife, he had lost his own mother. He had also lost a classmate. Yet, nothing hurt more than knowing that he was used as camouflage by the very monsters that had set up that fateful day at Wookiees, if the police officers were being straight with him. If only he could get his hands on one of those monsters from love, but things won't be so convenient for him. As he looks onto the spawn of that hated hero, with thawed eyes, he felt loss. Damn it. Though he admired passionate heroes, he found himself less passionate than Shoto, who was only focused on the rescue victims at hand. The air tenses and the boy with the anguished face, like a gust of wind, disperses from Toga's sight. Well, that's boring. No Deku in sight or even some light entertainment for her troubles. Nemoto never expected much from the League of Villains, but one of those things he expected was some level of respect. The young master was watching. Where's that Himiko girl? The one he was asking was an equally troublesome person across from a table. The lights were dim, and the room was isolated. This was supposed to be a serious interrogation. A high school girl has her exams, don't you know? It was clear the shapeshifter didn't go to school, but Nemoto would play along. It's August. It was only a matter of time before someone confesses under the influence of his quirk. Twice eyes, and swings his head in annoyance. She wanted to see what's his face at that hero exam thingy. What's his face? Freckles, green hair, probably related to you know who. One of you is related to a hero trainee. Dunno, one of our guys has blue eyes and shoots fire and we don't judge. Brave man, considering what happened to that fine piece of. You look at her and think, ice, baby, have to think it twice, and she already comes with ice. Can't even tell she squeezed out 4 kids. Heroes are so lucky. Smack, was the audible crack made by the back of a hand against Twice's cheek. Nemoto never thought he would have needed to resort to physical interrogation, considering the nature of his quirk, but these buffoons are the exception to the rule. Twice tries to straighten up and look serious, coughing into his fist, but that's the thing, finding people that took him seriously was something he always struggled with. So, Dabi comes and goes. Does his own thing. We're all searching for our own thing, you know. His hands grasp his heart and Nemoto is not amused. The young master was losing faith in him. You don't seem to know a lot about your coworkers. Hey, it's company policy, I'm just happy I have people to hang out with. I tried hanging out by myself, but it didn't work out. Pretty sure we actually had an actual UA student with us before, but snitches get put in ditches, though I can't really be sure if he was actually put in one. Such a tactic wasn't all too different from the one Overhaul himself employed. Those with nowhere else to go are very obedient. He himself didn't really think too hard on the background of some of his men. It was easy to tell who was a somebody and who was a nobody. The fact that there was no substitute copy of that girl here for attendance put doubt on the legitimacy of the masked man capable of duplication. Are you a copy? Tears swell up and bleed through the mask. A whimper becomes an angry shout. Not a day goes by without me wondering. Thank you for bringing it up. I was having a good day until now. Overhaul rolls his eyes and Nemoto gets a bit angry. These were the typical responses from these so-called villains, despite being under the influence of his confession quirk. Every time they interrogate one of them, Nemoto loses face in front of the young master. He hates these youngsters. Still, with the shapeshifter at that exam, that meant that she hadn't stolen the identities of one of the henchmen. The utility of her disguising ability couldn't be denied, but with the core to their plans so close, she was quite the liability, so it was always important to keep track of her location. With such unstable personalities, there was no telling what could happen. It was clear that the Shigaraki brat held no leashes, but that was something Overhaul wasn't displeased with. That so-called leader of the League of Villains was a brat who couldn't hold anything, but there was nothing more to be expected from a pawn of the King of Night. As such, his pieces were free for him to use. Bring in the next one. As Twice leaves, he puts his hand on Nemoto's shoulder, whispering into his ear very audibly. Say, can't I have a gun like you, or two? It seems you guys have no trouble getting those. Oh, maybe a sword too. Nemoto wonders about his life choices and wonders where it all went wrong. Right now, All Might was watching the future of heroism from the distance as they honed their edges with every clash. As he eyes his former sidekick, it was clear he was satisfied, but at the back of All Might's head was always a nagging sensation. The end of his journey was near. Relief or despair. The future was in capable hands, and yet the symbol of peace is left wanting. He knew it was wrong, but a part of him wanted to carry out what he had been doing forever. To save people for all eternity as the symbol of peace, but he knew that such selfish thinking was in line with the one he hated most. All for One, the ageless and merciless, the shadow that lurked and continues to lurk in every facet of this country. That man was still alive, despite the massive head injury All Might gave him those years ago, yet it should have been expected. I'm still alive. He can still feel the scar on his abdomen. Without the luxury of his stomach, he had become the toothpick of a man that he is today who continues to puff out his chest to alleviate the public's worries. As the years ticked on, he was forced to take less and less responsibility to keep up the public image that society leaned against for support. All for One. That final battle was a hazy memory, but there were things he couldn't help but remember. The stench of blood and the sight of his own guts strewn across the floor, it seemed that he had screwed up. The face of his enemy standing above him wasn't clear. Really now, Shimura was quite delusional. Giving such responsibility to someone quirkless. Her death was a curse for you, wasn't it? When she died, you had no choice but walk on this bloody path and meet me. The smiling madman in front of him was quite the character to be giving a speech at this critical moment, yet he himself was madder for wanting to respond. The taste of iron was an unpleasant one. This didn't have to happen this way, you know. If only you had stopped, but you continued to move forward. You had to go beyond, smashing my comrades into the pavement, and for what? You're only here because you wanted to feel big. You were nothing, a zero, and you wanted to be something, a hero. But alas, without power, goals are but mere dreams, and you're about to wake up from one, so in a roundabout way, maybe you should consider thanking me with your final breath. The hero was bleeding, but a single memory keeps him awake. If you find yourself against a wall, remember your origin, and that will take you beyond your so-called limits. I don't know about my final breath. The dying man can only smile as he grits his teeth, charging forward and beyond towards his nemesis with fists clenched. But how's my second wind? Heroes are the most dangerous on their last legs. Smash. The fists clash and sink, each only containing enough power to cancel out the other. A vivid display of green and yellow blurs across the barren landscape of Training Ground Beta. It seemed like their control was improving independent of his influence. I see. The thing that bothered Toshinori the most, it seemed, was the fact the future was growing without him independently. His master had guided him, personally hammering ideals into his head, yet he did not get the chance to do the same. They don't need me to teach them anything. His former sidekick disagrees. The symbol of peace wasn't such a meaningless thing. You're wrong. Those two, us, all of us here are here because of you. As the symbol of peace, you have taught us how to live. Night Eye was sincere with his words. The symbol of peace was an example many fledgling heroes aspire to become. Through inspiration, the next generation was taught how to live. Even so, it wasn't I who taught them how to fight, how to move forward, and taught them how to become strong. The symbol of peace was but a goal. Without strength, a goal is but a dream. Teachers like you, like Saitama. A pillar is not without foundations. As a teacher at UA, I'm still lacking. It was through a collective effort that the symbol of peace held any meaning. Who is this Saitama? Was Night Eye's honest question. All Might recalls that white cape that the old man wore. It couldn't have just been a coincidence. That was his gut feeling. My master's inspiration. Overhaul examines the piece of flesh in his hands and confirms once again the presence of the extra toe joint. Quite pitiful indeed, even with a body free of disease, your mind is sick. Completely disregarding the missing foot, the mental patient acts like her leg didn't just explode in front of her. Though it does speak volumes about how deranged the thing in front of him was. If only Eri was nonchalant of such things. It's not nice to say those things even if they're true. Overhaul fixes the thing he casually broke with care. Individuals without quirks, the uninfected, especially of the younger generation, were exceedingly rare specimens. Those specimen that perfectly sums up everything wrong with this world. Those born right, the healthy and disease-free minority, saw themselves as wrong in the world they lived in. The majority that was born wrong refused to see the wrongness in themselves. That was why it was so important to drill into Erie's head that she was born wrong, for Irie had potential to become the vaccine. It was risky, but slowly, he needed to expose Irie to the outside world's wrongness. If Irie learned of that wrongness, then it was only logical that she become as cooperative as someone like Nemoto. Nemoto continues the questioning. It has come to our knowledge that you resemble a certain UA student. Took second place at the recent sports festival. Explain. Tears well up, drops the size of chicken gizzard flow. It's always about Deku, isn't it? Like a main character. Even the final boss stresses over him. For Deku was a threat even greater than All Might. So many quirks, but he couldn't spare one. Or even spare to look at me. Relationships are all give and take, but all for one who lacked eyes could not look at anyone. Fine wines take time. Why do you think I took Intenko? Now, this black mask and this breathing apparatus, is it subtle enough? All for one always berated her for having no patience or subtlety, but clearly someone with an age-halting quirk could think like that, so the warning was ignored. Even though he brought me into this world in the first place. From a certain point of view. You lot. You're all quite the special snowflakes, aren't you? Do you want to hear about that one time, what we did to this one snowflake? Nemoto has officially given up. It seemed that his confession quirk seemed to be of no use whatsoever when it came to these kids. Those under the influence of his quirk were forced to confess, but that assumed that the target was right in the head. He could not even get angry at them anymore. His master on the other hand seemed to have more patience. Overhaul quickly picks up on what was audible and ignores the arm crossing, as well as the pouty pout. If Nemoto wasn't present with his confession quirk active, he would have dismissed whatever that was said as pure nonsense. In fact, what was said was probably nonsense. The deranged will confess to all sorts of things. I see. Does that massive disease see himself akin to Cronus? Well, you're far from the only one. All for one. All Might. I always believed there to be a connection between the kings. Even so, it was a common story in the underworld. Someone born without any deformity seeks out the most deformed of them all. The Night King in hopes of becoming deformed themselves. Pawns like the one in front of him that judged themselves to have no value, were easy to acquire with the right words, so it was best to play along. Whether the thing in front of him was a spy mattered not, for those without power, without quirks, could not oppose those that did. Precisely because the girl in front of him was utterly powerless, that he can entrust an important task. Born blessed thinking yourself cursed. Truly you are a lost lamb. Pitiful lamb that has been thrown away. I have a use for you. The tears become a minor sniffle, then a seething anger and an eerie giggle, and then a laugh rises to the surface. Bless. Sorry. I never imagined anyone would try that on me. Trying to buy something like me with words like that, aren't you being ripped off? The warning is confessed without fanfare, yet those that look down on others from a perch, always had difficulty listening. Staring at a package of half-priced meat, Bakugo grits his teeth. With his arms bound to his crutches, he can only stare. He couldn't do anything. The provisional exams have passed by, and Bakugo had missed them along with the setting sun. Up until then, he was restrained to his hospital bed, and it was only after exams did the doctor let him go free. Stop mumbling. His mother had brought him grocery shopping as a way to give her son some fresh air. From the app on her smartphone, there was a sale on meat this evening. Proteins were a crucial part in a speedy rehabilitation after all. Eyeing every package, mother and son were carefully taking note of each cut. There were lean cuts and there were not so lean cuts. Depending on the person, depending on the lifestyle, fat was not necessarily the enemy. This was especially true for spicy foods. Grain is fine, but this stuff has clearly been frozen for a while. The capsaicin in peppers, responsible for their heat, their punch was something that could easily overstay its welcome, making it hard to taste anything else. For that reason, fat was needed. For capsaicin was soluble in fat. Those people who try to wash down spicy foods with water were clearly doing something wrong. A proper spicy dish doesn't require such a thing. Despite the necessity of fat, foods can become too rich. Not too lean, but not too fat. That's when Bakugo saw it. The perfect cut, but then it was gone. Hot pot always needs some meat, was a familiar yet irritating voice. Bald head, white cape, yellow jumpsuit, red gloves and a rather unkempt beard were things that could only belong to one person on this planet. In that person's hands was what Bakugo had his eye on, but could not reach. You did that on purpose, didn't you? Oh, you're shopping too? Don't play. Smack was the sound that was made when something struck the back of Bakugo's head. I'm on crutches, you old hag. Mitsuki pushes against her son's head, forcing him to bow. You must be that teacher he's always talking about. Thank you, always keeping my son in check. Being thanked was quite the rare thing for Saitama. He scratches the back of his head, feeling the praise a bit undeserved. Don't mention it. Maybe there was a correlation between one-up heroes and good moms. It was then Bakugo noted another familiar yet irritating voice. Round face was what he uttered under his breath. Oh, you're here too, was what Saitama says without much surprise. Of course. Uraka pulls out her smartphone with a smug look, and on the screen is displayed a digital flyer. It was the same one on Saitama's phone, as well as the one on Mitsuki's. All three of them exchanged the same smug look, with Uraka looking the smuggest. She originally planned to flaunt her newly minted license in front of Bakugo's face, but plans changed. It never occurred to her that Bakugo was the type of person who went shopping with his mom. She leans over Bakugo and whispers into his ear. Wait until I tell the others about this. Uraka was the smuggest person there, until Mitsuki leaned over and whispered something into her ear. If my son gave you any scars during the sports festival, be sure to know that I'll have him take responsibility. The atmosphere instantly got awkward, and Uraka could only meekly utter a single word as a reply. Right? Bakugo grits his teeth, unsure what to say. Sure, Round Face's smug face was wiped away, but it didn't feel good at all. Denki's smug punchable face comes into view. Many found Bakugo's personality, to be quite honest, garbage. It wouldn't be wrong to think for such a person to have a hard time getting a girlfriend, much less friends. It was unfortunate for Bakugo that his own mother thought so as well. It was supposed to be a good day for Uraka. She had just passed the provisional license exam and was about to have her night out of splurging, or rather, what could count as splurging on her meager living expenses. All-meat hot pot was what she had on her mind. Living alone away from her parents, she had skipped meals before, but Saitama-sensei had converted her into a discount hunter. Even if she couldn't have meat every day, her stomach was always full. In order for a hero to be strong, they had to train like hell, but also eat well. In the corner of an aisle, Mount Lady was shopping too, comparing various flavors of cup noodles. Property damage was always something she had to account for every paycheck. That was the price to pay for a hero with a gigantification quirk working in the city. Sometimes the pay part of paycheck was nothing more than a misnomer, unless you count the part of her having to pay back money. Lately now, those payback type paychecks were increasing in frequency without her breaking anything. When something breaks in the area, she is always the first one suspected, but she knew of her own innocence. It's all his fault. She places all she could afford for dinner into her basket. When I find that white cape baldy aisle. It was then something white caught the corner of her eye as she turned the corner. You? Yet, it was only for an instant. The checkout clerk was half asleep. Sale days were always the worst, but the sounds of coins clattering across the counter certainly were a wake-up call. There would be an earful from the manager that day about a missing package of meat. The loose change that was found on that day did not cover it. Thank you so much for joining me on this incredible journey today. I hope you enjoyed exploring the fascinating what-if scenario of Deku. The possibilities were truly mind-blowing. If you found this video entertaining, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel. Your support means the world to me and inspires me to bring you more captivating content in the future. Stay tuned for more exciting what-if stories and other amazing videos coming your way. Until next time, take care, stay curious.